So guys, continue in the part 2. This after all was the man who years later would say, the great questions of the time will be decided not by speeches and resolutions but by iron and blood. Passionate, patriot and lover of military glory, Bismarck nevertheless gave a speech in Parliament at the height of the war favor that astonished all who heard it. View unto the statesman, he said, who makes war without without a reason that will still be valid when the war is over. After the war, you will all look differently at these questions. Will you then have the courage to turn to the peasant contemplating the ashes of his farm, to the man who has been crippled, to the father who has lost his children? Not only did Bismarck go on to talk of the madness of this war, but strangest of all, he praised Austria and defended her actions. These went against everything he had stood for. The consequences were immediate. Bismarck was against the war. What could this possibly mean? Other deputies were confused, and several of them changed their votes. Eventually, the king and his ministers won out, and war was averted. A few weeks after Bismarck's infamous speech, the king, grateful that he had spoken for peace, made him a cabinet minister. A few years later, he became the Prussian premier. In this role, he eventually led his country and a peace-loving king into a war against Austria, crushing the former empire and establishing a mighty German state with Prussia at its head. Interpretation. At the time of his speech in 1850, Bismarck made several calculations. First, he sensed that the Prussian military, which had not kept peace with other European armies, was unready for war, that Austria in fact might very well win a disastrous results for the future. Second, if the war were lost and Bismarck had supported it, his career would be gravely jeopardized. The king and his conservative minister wanted peace. Bismarck wanted power. The answer was to throw people off the scent by supporting a cause he detested, saying things he would laugh at if said by another. A whole country was fooled. It was because of Bismarck's speech that the king made him a minister, a position from which he quickly rose to be prime minister, attaining the power to strengthen the Prussian military and accomplish what he had wanted along. The humiliation of Austria and the unification of Germany under Prussia's leadership. Bismarck was certainly one of the cleverest statesmen who ever lived, a master of strategy and deception. No one suspected what he was up to in this case. Had he announced his real intentions, arguing that it was better to wait now and fight later, he would not have won the argument, since most Prussians wanted war at that moment and mistakenly believed that their army was superior to the Austrians. He had played up to the king, asking to be made a minister in exchange for supporting peace. He would not have succeeded either. The king would have distrusted his ambition and doubt his sincerity. By being completely insincere and sending misleading signals. However, he decided everyone, consulted his purpose and attained everything he wanted. Such is the power of hiding your intentions. Key to power. Most people are open books. They say what they feel, blurt out their opinions at every opportunity, and constantly reveal their plans and intentions. They do this for several reasons. First, it is easy and natural to always want to talk about one's feelings and plans for the future. It takes effort to control your tongue and monitor what you reveal. Second, many believe that by being honest and open, they are winning people's heart and showing their good nature. They are greatly deluded. Honesty is actually a blunt instrument which bloodies more than it cuts. Your honesty is likely to offend people. It is much more prudent to tailor your words, telling people what they want to hear rather than the coarse and ugly truth of what you feel or think. More important, by being unambiguously open, you make yourself so predictable and familiar that it is almost impossible to respect or fear you, and power will not occur to a person who cannot inspire such emotions. If you yearn for power, quickly lay honesty aside and train yourself in the art of concealing your intentions. Master the art and you will always have the upper hand. Basic to an ability to conceal one's intentions is a simple truth about human nature. Our first instinct is to always trust appearance. We cannot go around doubting the reality of what we see and hear. Constantly imagine the appearance concealed something else who exhaust and terrify us. This fact makes it relatively easy to conceal one intention. Simply dang, dangle an object you seem to desire, a goal you seem to aim for, in front of people's eyes, and they will take the appearance for reality. Once their eyes focus on the decoy, they will fail to notice what you are really up to. In seduction, set up conflicting signals such as desire and indifferences, and you not only throw them off the scent, you inflame their desire to possess you. The tactic that is often effective in setting up a red herring is to appear to support an idea or cause that is actually contrary to your own sentiments. Most people will believe you have experienced a change of heart, since it is so unusual to play too lightly with something as emotional as one's opinions and values. The same applies for any decoy object of desire. Seem to want something in which you are actually not at all interested, and your enemies will be thrown off the scent, making all kinds of errors in their calculations. During the War of Spanish Succession in 1711, the Duke of Marlborough, head of the English army, wanted to destroy a key French fort because it protected a vital thoroughfare into France. Yet yet he knew that if he destroyed it, the French would realize what he wanted to advance down that road. Instead, then he merely captured the fort and and garrisoned it with some of his troops, making it appear as if the wanted it for some purpose of his own. The French attacked the fort and the Duque let them recapture it. Once they had it back, though they destroyed it, figuring that the Duque had wanted it for some important reason. Now that the fort was gone, the road was unprotected, and Marlborough could easily march into France. Use this tactic in the following manner: hide your intentions not by closing up, with the risk of appearing secretive and making people superiors, but by taking endlessly about your desire and goals, just not your real ones. You will kill three birds with one stone. You appear friendly, open, and trusting. You conceal your intentions, and you send your reveals on time consuming wild goose chase. Another powerful tool in throwing people off the scent is false sincerity. People easily mistake sincerity for honesty. Remember, their first instinct is to trust appearance, and since they value honesty and want to believe in the honesty of those around them, they will rarely doubt you or see through your act. Seeming to believe what you say gives your words great weight. This is how ego deceived and destroyed Othello. Given the depth of his emotions, the apparent sincerity of his concern about Desdemona's supposed infidelity, how could Othello distrust him? This is also how the great con artist Yellow Kid will pulled the wool over Sucker's eyes, seeming to believe so deeply in the decoyed object he was dangling in front of them. He made its reality hard to doubt. It is important, of course, not to go too far in this area. Sincerity is a tricky tool. Appear over passionate, and you raise suspicions. Be be measured and believable, or your rules will seem the put on that it is to make your false sincerity an effective weapon in concealing your intentions oppose a belief in honesty and forthrightness as important social values. Do these as publicly as possible. Emphasize your position on this subject by occasionally divulging some heartfelt thought, though only one that is actually meaningless or irrelevant. Of course, Napoleon's minister Talleyrand was a master at taking people into his confidence by revealing some apparent secret. This feigned confidence a decoy would then elicit a real confidence on the other person's part. Remember, the best deceivers do everything they can to cloak their roguish qualities. They cultivate an air of honesty is on one area to disguise their dishonesty in others. Honesty is merely another decoy in their arsenal of weapons. Part 2. Use smoke screens to disguise your actions. Deception is always the best strategy, but the best deceptions require a screen of smoke to distract people's attention from your real purpose. The bland exterior, like the unreadable poker face, is often the perfect smoke screen, hiding your intentions behind the comfortably and familiar. If you lead the sucker down a familiar path, he won't catch on when you lead him into a trap. Observance of the Law 1. In 1910, Mr. Sam Gaziel of Chicago sold his warehouse business for close to $1 million. He settled down to semi-retirement and the managing of his many properties, but deep inside he itched for the old days of deal making. One day a young man named Joseph Well visited his office, wanting to buy an apartment he had up for sale. Gaziel explained the terms. The price was $8,000, but he only required a down payment of $2,000. Well said he would sleep on it, but he came back the following day and offered to pay the full $8,000 in cash if Gaziel would wait a couple of days. Until a deal Weil was working on came through. Even in semi-retirement, a clever businessman like Gaziel was curious as to how Weil would be able to come up with so much cash so quickly. Well seemed reluctant to say and quickly changed the subject, but Gaziel was persistent. Finally, after assurance of confidently, Well told Gaziel the following story. Well's uncle was secretary to a coterie of multi-millionaire financiers. These wealthy gentlemen had purchased a hunting lodge in Migen 10 years ago at a cheap price. They had not used the lodge for a few years, so they had decided to sell it and had asked Well's uncle to get whatever he could for it, for good reasons of his own. The uncle had been nursing a, a grudge against the millionaires for years. This was his chance to get back at them. He would sell the property for $35,000 to a set-up man. The financiers were too wealthy to worry about this low price. The set-up man would then turn around and sell the property again for its real price, around 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 155,000 dollars. The uncle Wells and the third man would split the profit from this second sale. It was all legal and for a good cause. The uncle's just retribution. Gazel had heard enough. He wanted to be the setup buyer. Well was reluctant to involve him, but Gazel would not back down. The idea of a large profit plus a little adventure had him camping at the bit. Well explained that Gazel would have to put up the $35,000 in cash to bring the deal off. Gazel, a millionaire, said he could get the money with a snap of his fingers. Well finally reluctant and agreed to arrange a meeting between the uncle, Gazel, and the financiers in the town of Glassburg, Illinois. On the train ride to Galesburg, Gazel met the uncle, an impressive man, with whom he avidly discussed business. Well also brought along a companion, a somewhat punctual man named George Gross. Well explained to Gazel that he himself was boxing trainer, that Gross was one of the promising prize fighter he trained, and that he asked Gross to come along to make sure the fighters stay in shape. For a promising fighter, Gross unimpressive looking. He had grey hair and a beer belly. But Gazel was so excited about the deal that he didn't really think about the man's flabby appearance. Once in Glassburg, Well and his uncle went to fetch the financier while Gazel waited in a hotel room with Gross, who promptly put on his boxing trunks. As Gazel half-watched, Gross began to shadowbox, distracted as he was. Gazel ignored how badly the boxer whistled after a few minutes of exercise, although his style seemed real enough. An hour later, Well and his uncle reappeared with a financiers, an impressive, intimidating group of men, all wearing fancy suits. The meeting went well, and the financier agreed to sell the lodge to Gazel, who had already had the $35,000 wired to a local bank. These minor business now settled, the financial setback in their chairs and began to banter about high finance, throwing out the man JP JP Morgan as if they knew the man. Finally, one of them noticed the boxer in the corner of the room. Well explained what he was going there. The financier countered that he too had a boxer in his entourage, whom he named. Well laughed pleasantly and explained that his men could easily knock out their men. Conversation escalated into argument in the heat of passion. Well challenged the men to a bet. The financier eagerly agreed and left to get their men ready for a fight. And the next day, as soon as they had left, the uncle yelled at Well right in front of Gazelle that they did not have enough money to bet with. And once the financier discovered this, the uncle would be fired. Well apologized for getting him in this mess. But he had a plan. He knew the other boxer well, and with a little prep, they could fix the fight. But where could the money come from the bet? The uncle replied. Without it, they were as good as dead. Finally, Gazelle had heard enough. Unveiling the Geopardies, his deal with any ill will, he offered his own 35,000 cash for part of the bet. Even if he lost that, he would wire for more money and still make a profit on the sale of the lodge. The uncle and nephew thanked him with their own $15,000 and Gazelle's $35,000. They would manage to have enough for the bet. That evening, as Gazelle watched the two boxers rehearse the fix in the hotel room, his mind reeled at the killing he was going to make from both the boxing match and the sale of the lodge. The fight took place in a gym the next day. We handled the cash which was placed for security in a locked box. Everything was processing was planned in the hotel room. The financiers were looking glum at how badly their fighters was doing, and Gazelle was dreaming about the easy money he was about to make. Then suddenly a wild swing by the financier's fighter hit Gross hard in the face, knocking him down. When he hit the canvas, blood spurted from his mouth. He caused then lay still. One of the financiers, a former doctor, checked his pulse. He was dead. The millionaires panicked. Everyone had to get out before the police arrived. They could all charge with murder. Terrified, Gazelle hightailed it out of the gym and back to Chicago, leaving behind his $35,000, which he was only too glad to forget. for it seemed a small price to pay to avoid being implicated in a crime. He never wanted to see Well or any of the other again. After Gazil scurried out, Gross stood up under his own steam. The blood that had sprouted, sprouted from his mouth came from a bowl filled with chicken blood and hot water that he had hidden in his cheek. The whole affair had been masterminded by Well, better known as the Yellow Kid, one of the most creative con artists in history. Well, split the $35,000 with the financier and the boxer, a nice little profit for a few days' work. Interpretation: the Yellow Kid has staked out Gazil as the perfect sucker long before he set up the con. He knew the boxing match scam would be the perfect ruse to separate Gazil from his money quickly and definitively. But he also knew that if he had begun by trying to interest Gazil in the boxing match, he would have failed miserably. He had to conceal his intentions and switch attention, create a smoke screen in this case the sale of the lodge. When the train ride and in the hotel room, Gazil's mind had been completely occupied with the pending deal. The easy money, the chance to hobnob with wealthy men. He had failed to notice that Gross was out of the shape and middle-aged at best. Such is the distracting power of a smoke screen. Engrossed in the business deal, Gazil's attention was easily diverted to the boxing match, but only at a point when it was already too late for him to notice the details that would give given Gross away. The match, after all, now depended on a bribe rather than on the boxer's physical condition, and Gazil was so distracted at the end by the illusion of the boxers that he completely forgot about his money. Learn from the Yellow Kid. The familiar inconspicuous front is the perfect smoke screen. Approach your mark with an idea that seems ordinary enough. A business deal, financial intrigue. The sucker's mind is distracted, his suspicions allayed. That is when you gently guide him onto the second path, the slippery slope down which he slides helplessly into your trap. Observance of the law 2. In the mid 1920th century, the powerful warlords of Ethiopia were coming to the realization that a young man of the nobility named Haile Selassie, also known as Ras Tafri, was out competing them all and nearing the point where he could proclaim himself their leader, unifying the country for the first time in the decades. Most of his rivals could not understand how this be quiet, mild-mannered men had been able to take control. Yet in 1927, Selassie was able to summon the warlords one at a time to come to Addis Ababa to declare their loyalty and recognize him a leader. Some hurried, some hesitated, but only one disarmed Blacha of Sidamo did defy Selassie totally. A blustery man, Blacha was a great warrior and he considered the new leader weak and unworthy. He pointedly stayed away from the capital. Finally, Selassie, in his gentle but stern way, commanded Blacha to camp. The warlord decided to obey, but in doing so he would turn the tables on his pretender to the Ethiopian throne. He would come to Addis Ababa at his own speed and with an army of 10,000 men, a force large enough to defend himself, perhaps even start a civil war, stationing his formidable force in a valley 3 miles from the capital. He waited as the king would. Selassie would have to come to him. Selassie did indeed send emissaries asking Blacha to attend an afternoon banquet in his honor. But Blacha, no fool, knew history. He knew that previous kings and lords of Ethiopia had used banquets as a trap. Once he was there and full of drink, Selassie would have him arrested or murdered. To signal his understanding to the situation, he agreed to come to the banquet, but only if he could bring his personal bodyguard, 600 of his best soldiers, all armed and ready to defend him and themselves. To Blacha's surprise, Selassie answered with the utmost politeness that he would be honored to play host to such worries. On the way to the banquet, Blacha warned his soldiers not to get drunk and to be on their guard. When they arrived at the place, Selassie was his charming best. He deferred to Blacha, treated him as if he desperately needed his approval and cooperation, but Blacha refused to be charmed, and he warned Selassie that if he did not return to his camp by nightfall, his army had orders to attack the capital. Selassie reacted as if hurt by this mistrust. Over the meal, when it came time for the traditional singing of the song in honor of Ethiopia's leaders, he made a point of allowing only songs honoring the warlord of Sidamo. It seemed to Blacha that Selassie was scared, intimidated by this great warrior who could not be outwitted. Sensing the change, Blacha believed that he would be the one to be the one to call the shots in the days to come. At the end of the afternoon, Blacha and his soldiers began their march back to camp amidst cheer and gun salutes. Looking back to the capital over his shoulder, he planned his strategy. How his own soldiers would march through the capital in triumph within weeks, and Chelsea would be put in his place being either prison or death. When Blacha came in sight of his camp, however, he saw that something was terribly wrong. Where before there had been colorful tents stretching as far as the eye could see, now there was nothing, only smoke from doused fires. What devil's magic was this? A witness told Blacha that had happened during the banquet. A large army commanded by an ally of Celsius had stolen up upon Blacha, and accompanied by a side route he had not seen. This army had not come to fight, however, knowing that Blacha would have heard a noisy battle and hurried back with his 600 men bodyguard. Chelsea had armed his own troops with baskets of gold and cash. They had surrounded Blacha's army and proceeded to purchase every last one of their weapons. Those who refused were very easily intimidated. Within a few hours, Blacha's entire force had been disarmed and scattered in all directions. Realizing his danger, Blacha decided to march south with his 600 soldiers to regroup. But the same army that he disarmed his soldiers back his way. To other way out was to march on the capital. But Chelsea had set a large army to defend it like a chess player. He had predicted Blacha's moves and had checkmated him for the first time in his life. Blacha surrendered to repent his sins of pride and ambition. He agreed to enter a monastery. Interpretation: throughout Chelsea's long region, no one could quite figure him out. Ethiopians liked their leaders' fires, but Chelsea, who wore the front of a gently peace-loving man, lasted longer than any of them. Never angry or impatient, he lured his victims with sweet smiles, luring them with charm and obsequiousness before he attacked. In the case of Blacha, Chelsea played on the man's awareness, his suspicions that the banquet was a trap, which in fact it was, but not the one he expected. Chelsea's way of allaying Blacha's fears, letting him bring his bodyguard to the banquet, giving him top billings there, making him feel in control, created a thick smoke screen, concealing the real actions 3 miles away. Remember, the paranoid and wary are often the easiest to deceive. Win their trust in one area and you have a smoke screen that blinds their view in another, letting you creep up and level them with a devastating blow. A helpful or apparently honest gesture, or one that implies the other person's superiority. These are perfect diversionary device properly set up. The smoke screen is a weapon of great power. It enables the gentle Chelsea to totally destroy his enemy without firing a single bullet. Do not underestimate the power of Thapari. He, he creeps like a mouse, but he has jaws like a lion. Key to power. If you believe that deceivers are colorful folk who mislead with elaborate lies and tall tales, you are greatly mistaken. The best deceivers utilize a bland and inconspicuous front that call on attention to themselves. They know the extravagant words and gestures immediately raise suspicion. Instead, they involve their mark in the familiar, the banal, the harmless in yellow kid bells dealings with Sam Gazil. The familiar was business deal in the Ethiopian case. It was Chelsea misleading obsequences exactly what Blata would have expected from a vicar warlord. Once you have lured your sucker's attention with the familiar, they will not notice the deception being perpetrated behind their backs. This derives from a simple truth. People can only focus on one thing at a time. It is really too difficult for them to imagine that the bland and harmless person they are dealing with a simultaneously setting to something else. The grayer and more uniform the smoke in your smoke screen, the better it conceals your intentions in the decoy and read hearing device discussed in part 1. You actively distract people. In the smoke screen, you lure your victims, drawing them into your web. Because it is so hypnotic, this is often the best way of concealing your intentions. The simplest form of smoke screen is facial expression behind a bland, unreadable exterior. All sorts of mayhem can be planned without detection. This is a weapon that the most powerful men in history have learned to perfect. It was said that no one could read Franklin D. Roosevelt's face. Baron James Rothschild made a lifelong practice to discussing his real thoughts behind bland smile and nondescript looks. Stendhal wrote of Talleyrand never was a face less of a barometer. Henry Kissinger would bore his opponents around the negotiating table to tears with his monotonous voice. His blank look, his endless researches of details. Then, as their eyes glazed over, he would suddenly hit them with a list of bold terms. Caught off ground, caught off guard, they would be easily intimidated, as one poker manual explains it. While playing his hand, the good player is seldom an actor. Instead, he practices a blend behavior that minimizes readable patterns, frustrates and op- confuse opponents, permits greater construction constructions. So guys, continue the part 2 in tomorrow.